let us start. If others join, they'll join as we go along. This is usually an elective additional. So as I was saying to you that we've got core, actually, I'll explain it as we go along. Caesar, I'm going to kick off, my man. I hope you're there. But welcome
Okay,
to
cool, no problem.
all joining. And Tombi, I'm going to kick off. If others join, they join. Welcome and thanks for coming through. And this is the presentation skills element of the value-add program. Let me share my screen quickly, and I'll rush through the earlier stuff. Sees where Matshidiso has just joined the program, so he's new to the whole thing. This is his first session with us. So what I'll do is, I've already gone through the program with him, so I'm not going to go in detail. What I'll do is I'll just quickly run through, and also for your reminder, sees where some of the stuff that we, that we're going to do. So presentation skills, this is what we're going to be talking about. I had a good time putting this together. Just to remind you, value add, inspiring you guys, and hopefully when I inspire you to be comfortable to go out and do presentations, might even turn into your, well, actually in more ways than one. Oh, have we lost Sizwe? I think we've lost Sizwe. But let's see, I'm sure he'll come back on. But I'll talk to you because Sizwe knows the stuff, Matshidiso, so I think his network must have let him down. We might inspire you to go out there and do some presentations. We spoke about this in terms of value add being live and interactive, so we're doing this all in the context of Zoom, and I also spoke to you about our other programs. So these are the core programs, the self-mastery programs, just as a reminder, Machidi. So this one is what we call an elective program. So it's not part of the core, it's an additional that we've just put on just for the, just for the benefit of, you're back, Caesar, good. Just for the benefit of, just getting a little bit more. But the core elements are this, and next week we'll be talking about Dream the Plan, which I'm very excited to tell you guys about, because I think I've got some good stuff that might be useful to you on that. And then all of you know, well, you also know that we've got, this is the elective program, the one on your far right as an example. The last one we had was work readiness, and then we've got the Career Academy that's coming up, Matshidiso. Caesar, I was just saying, Matshidiso, this is his first session with us. So I'm just going through this quickly so that he understands what we're doing. And then the Leadership and Mogul Masterclass, we've got a Mogul Masterclass on the 30th. I think it's this week, Wednesday, Thursday. A little mogul called Dumisa Rankin, who happens to be my son, is going to come and talk about digital marketing. So join us for that one. Don't worry about the elements of the costs. That's more for people who don't know much. And then our other programs, social media branding, et cetera, and we've spoken about these as well. And then we've got overviews. Feel free to join the overviews if you're interested. You will see we're going to start adding on additional programs. So when you find a program of any interest to you, let us know. For example, Valuepreneur is a very useful one for anyone who's in the entrepreneurial world. We're talking about, really for startups, people who are starting their businesses, etc. Join us for those overviews. And then events. These are the events. I think you guys have seen the poster for the Men of Value. I hope you're going to register. See where? Matshidiso, I hope you're going to register for Men of Value on Saturday. I think it's going to be good. We're trying to, celebrating women events have been very successful. The last one we had was on the 19th. So we've started a program particularly for men. And let's have a chat. Let's see, the next women's event is going to be the 5th one. So let's start with the first one and see where it takes us. The women's one's beginning to take a little shape in terms of the direction it's going and what people prefer, and then we can do that with a men's program. Cool, so let's kick off presentation skills. So the reason why I thought this is useful is I've spent a good deal of my life having to do presentations. a little bit of background around me is that when I was at school, I used to attend what they used to call Toastmasters. And Toastmasters was a really good program at schools to help public speaking, right? And on top of that, I also represented my school in public speaking. So public speaking is kind of something I've been doing for a while. Am I proficient at it? No, because I'm still nervous, but I do have some underlying, what I would call sort of tips that I'll talk about, or underlying things that you should do. And this is coming particularly from an observation point of view, right? So in the case of me sitting and listening, what are the kind of key things that I would pick out that are common across the board that would support any element? Now, the thing about presentation skills is that it's not always going to, as you know, happen to people who are presentation fundis. You are all at some point, whether you like it or not, going to have to find yourself in a position where you are talking to an audience and having to put across some kind of information, knowledge, in one form or another. So it's an inevitability, whether you're working in a small team, whether you're working in a large team, whether you do it for an organization, whether you do it one-on-one, one-on-two, it's an inevitability that you will be called up some point in your life, or have been called up some point in your life to do them. Now, the challenge is that sometimes they're so intermittent that you don't get what I would call the sort of acclimatization or the practice of it. And the second thing is that you have to craft it. It is a skill. That's why it's called presentation skills. It's like, you've got to consistently work at it so that you can get better at it. So what are the kind of few things that you should work on in order to start? And how can you present even though you're not a consistent or formal presenter? That's the kind of stuff that I'm going to go through. So I picked out a definition for presentations, which will talk a little bit about what I've talked about now. So my agenda is going to be the definition of presentations. I'm going to talk about authenticity in presentations. I'm going to talk about dealing with nerves before presentations. I'm going to talk about dealing with nerves during presentations. And then I'm going to end off by giving you my tips on some of the real key takeaways you need to have on presentation skills. And if you can harness some of these into your framework, it'll improve you as you go along. So the definition of hang on, let me move this. I can see my own presentation. The definition of a presentation: the giving of something to someone, especially as part of a formal ceremony. And I like this. I looked through this and I looked up a lot of definitions, and I thought this actually speaks and resonates with me, because presentations come in all sorts of forms, right? And the assumption that presentations always have to be followed with a PowerPoint slide is actually not true. It's actually literally giving off something, right? It can be a speech, it can be, in some cases, a discussion. But at the end of the day, you're holding somebody's attention as part of a formal process. They have an expectation of you, once you get up to speak, to actually listen to what you have to say. So that's the formality of it. This is not, hanging out as guys or ladies and having a little tete-a-tete. This is something of significance that has some kind of formality of it, and there is something of you that you need to give in the form of some form of communication. And I think this summed it up importantly for me, because it straddles a lot of areas. So you may need to give some form of presentation at a wedding. You may be the MC at a wedding, so you have to give some form of presentation. At a wedding, you may have to give a formal presentation in terms of how you pitch at work. Whatever it is, it's the giving of something, especially as part of a formal structure. And we're all going to have to do that at some point, whether we like it or not. So what is the key to giving a presentation? So let's just talk about the scenario here of whether you're in your own business, whether you're at work, you have been asked to come and present something, right? For me, the starting point on any presentation, regardless of what it is, right, is this point here, and it's critical for me, and it's authenticity. If you authenticity is simply, are you bringing you to the presentation? Are you bringing, or are you going to try to be somebody else? And where it all falls short is when you're not authentic to whatever it is that you're going to be presenting, right? There's nothing worse than a person who can't crack a joke trying to crack a joke, right? It can be, I'm sure you've been on occasions where you are listening to somebody who is presenting and had the odd cringe, right? At a moment where it's just gone off. And usually it goes off outside authenticity. Now, let me tell you an example of authenticity, and a big one that I actually learned recently in a presentation that I was listening to over Zoom. The person was presenting, and all of a sudden in the background, their dog started barking, right? Now, they were caught in two worlds because they continued speaking even though the dog was barking. Now, we all could hear the dog barking, but she had to pretend like she was just going to talk her way through the dog barking. That for me was an example of no authenticity. Authenticity would have been, oh, shucks, not that dog. It's barking again. Sorry, folks. I apologize. I hope the dog will stop, barking in a minute. Trust it to start barking right now, right in the middle of my speech. That kind of response, of reaction, becomes authentic, because what happened was that we started building up tension because we could hear this dog and we could see that she was trying to wade her way past the dog, even though we could hear the dog and we knew she could hear the dog. But if she responded in a manner that made us all relax, that, oh, I got this, I hear the dog, sorry, it's going to shut up in a minute, or I'll get it to shut up. Oh, give me a second, let me go and kick the dog, crack a little joke in the middle of it, then come back and say, okay, I was joking about kicking the dog, I just put it somewhere else. Something that is sincere, that if you're feeling nervous about something in the middle of a presentation, then be comfortable, because we'll all see that you're feeling nervous. Be comfortable to be authentic about how you're feeling or what's happening around you at the time. There is no way you can wade through a lack of authenticity. Another example would be, don't take up things in terms of presentations in any way or form that don't talk to who you are. So this comes to an element about being true to who you are. The key to presenting is just being true to who you are, right? If you're going to pitch up to a presentation and you just generally don't wear high heels, but you decide this is the day you're going to wear high heels, trust me, everything about the walk you have, everything about your expression is going to reflect that I'm uncomfortable in my high heels. And what that does, and the reason why I say it's the most critical component of anything that you do, even before you actually start presenting, is that you're going to make your audience uncomfortable. And it's key and important for you to be at ease, because if you're not at ease, you make your audience uncomfortable. And there's nothing worse than wading through an hour or an hour and a half's presentation, right, with an uncomfortable audience. You're uncomfortable, they're uncomfortable. So be authentic to who you are. Don't pitch up to a formal meeting with high heels if typically you don't wear high heels. Don't try to make an impression that's not who you are. So you need to be authentic about that. The second thing that you need to be authentic about is how you deliver the presentation. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. There are some people who are soft-spoken. If you're soft-spoken, speak a little loudly as a soft-spoken person. But don't all of a sudden feel that, people will tell you in presentations, you must project, you must, listen, if you need a microphone, get a microphone, right? If people can't hear you, ask them to move a little bit closer. But don't create an unauthentic environment for yourself. That's just going to make it uneasy for you during the process. If you are a slow speaker, if on occasion you feel that presenting in this manner is how you feel you want to construct your sentences, that's fine. If you are gesturing, that's also fine. Everything is about moderation, but it has to be about authenticity. I struggle listening to people who are not authentic about who they are, and you quickly pick it up. And then everybody's nervous and everybody's worried for you. You're worried for yourself because you're off key or off kilter around what it is that you are saying or doing that's not relative to you. So that's starting point. Don't even put together the presentation if it does not sit or construct with you. If it's in a work environment and you're asked to do X and X is not with you, i.e. deliver numbers in a presentation and numbers are not who you are, then it's fine to kick off by saying, oh no, here's that part of the presentation that really gives me goose pimples. I'm not great with numbers, but I'm going to go through this slowly so that I understand it and you understand it. So just bear with me as I go through this. That's authenticity. That's being true to who you are and what it is that you're doing as you're doing it without feeling overwhelmed by the circumstance and the situation. It doesn't matter how beautiful your presentation is. If you don't get that first piece right, boom, game over. We're just not even going to be listening. We're just going to be looking at the clock and hoping this is going to end for your sake, not even for our sake. Okay, so I hope that that sticks to you. Being true to who you are is so important that on occasions you're going to stand out because of being true to who you are. I use this picture as a classical example, right? To illustrate Richard Branson pitching up to what clearly everybody can see is an extremely formal affair. Everybody else is in a suit and tie. And Richard Branson arrives in what's probably looks like, a beach shirt. Now, he may be in this, but he still looks who he is in terms of being professional. But he has been authentic to his. I was actually looking for a very specific picture when I was looking for this, where he pitched up to meet Mandela, and Date Mandela was in a suit and tie, and he was in a jacket and shirt. And actually, in all the pictures that I've seen of Richard Branson, I've never seen him in a tie. So at some point, you need to be very clear about who are you in a particular situation. If you were presenting in this environment, and you're not a suit and tie person, and you pitched up in a suit that was a little bit over your size and everybody could see that, and your tie wasn't done properly, before you even got up to say anything, it would be an issue already. So you have to be true to who you are. And what I say here, you can deviate, but be professional about it. So one of the key things I've always liked about Mandela's shirts is that because he made the decision that I'm not going to be doing suits, he actually came in and started wearing these shirts, but they were professional about it. So in your contemplation around what is it that makes you authentic, you do need to keep an air of professionalism. You couldn't pitch up to some event like the one I showed you before in flip-flops and shorts and a Nike shirt like I've got on, right? So there's a level of authenticity, but there's also a level of professionalism. There's a level in which you can arrive not necessarily feeling like you have to be part of everybody else, all dressed in black in a suit and a tie, but you have to actually be able to be professional about it. Why? Because as I'm saying to you now, first impressions are going to count for everything. Before you speak, the first 5 or 6 seconds of somebody seeing you, they've already made an impression of you. And one of the clear impressions that you're going to exhibit even before you get up to speak, is that impression of not being genuine to who you are. So it almost sounds like, hang on, we haven't talked about the presentation. Yeah, because the presentation, in terms of it being as fantastic as you want it to be, is just not going to be that if you haven't got this right. If you haven't started in this place, if you haven't started in this spot. It's like the person who starts off their presentation, cracks an inappropriate joke, and from that moment on, the whole thing falls apart. So imperative that you're constantly thinking about and considering what it is that you're doing. Here's an example of being authentic. Give me 1 second. Somebody's at the gate and they're busy sending me the message. Hang on a second. Apologies for that. I'm got people standing at the gate, but nobody opening the gate for them. So there's a practical example of authenticity. Folks, I want you to remember that in a presentation, regardless of how, regardless of how serious you may deem it to be. And there's a tendency, if you're pitching for a tender, let's use that as a classical example. There's a tendency for you to heighten up everything beyond what it actually is. But whereas if you're arriving to make a pitch, the decision on how they're going to engage with you as a result of your pitch, in my opinion, and this is my experience in terms of how I see this, is probably going to be 70% your connection with them and 30% your content. So how natural they find you, how authentic they find you, how sincere they find you, how deliberate and intentional they find you is critical as much as the content of what it is that you're going to be talking about. People talk about doing presentations and where they've said the person is so, I can sense the passion that they have for what it is that they were talking about. And that is the thing that connects them. So if you're talking about something as passionately or as fervently, then the content becomes less of the focal point. It becomes how you're responding to the passion of what you're doing. So therefore, the idea of going into a presentation is to ensure that you remain as relaxed as possible based on the fact that you know that you are bringing your true best self to what's going on. So how do you deal with nerves before the presentation? Now we're getting into the hub of the presentation, right? That was the sort of, let me just make sure that I'm going to do the right presentation. And then secondly, how do I deal with nerves before the presentation? For me and my experience, if I really want to nail something really down, most of the time I have got to the point that most of the things that I talk about, I am really passionate about. So I don't really have to work on the passion. When I think of the content that I'm going to talk about, because I'm passionate about it, I kind of already have the content going. And as a consequence of that, before I've even got to making this PowerPoint slide, for example, I'm already thinking about it over and over again. But that's not always true, and you don't always have that all the time. I'll give you an example of a major, well, it wasn't a major boo-boo, but it was an expression of my lack of authenticity and the kind of results that it came with. I did a board presentation in my previous company at a time where my sense of really wanting to be in the company had begun to wane. And I could see and I could feel that what I was about to talk about, not only did I not believe that they were going to actually digest it and absorb it, I had got to the point where I was a bit sick and tired of having the conversation, convincing people of things that I knew that they were not actually going to digest. And that presentation was 20 minutes long, and in more ways than one, it kind of went pear-shaped. And one of the reasons it went pear-shaped is that it went pear-shaped because as much as I did this, which is the key thing to avoiding nerves before you start, I wasn't authentic. No amount of practice would have made any difference. So how do you get, if you've got the authenticity already bedded down, how do you avoid it? Practice. There is no other way than practicing, practicing, practicing. Go through it, left, right, center, up, down, put it away, come back to it an hour again, go through it again, put it away, come back a day later, go through it twice, practice it. Practice it in front of your mirrors. Talk to yourself like you've got an audience in front of you. Express yourself. Say it the way you would say it. Now you don't have to worry that anybody's looking at you. Practice that on a consistent basis. Record yourself. The day and age where you can stick a laptop or a camera phone in front of you, speak it for the first 15, or you don't even have to go that long, first 5 or 6 minutes. Look at yourself and critique yourself. Get your family and friends to get involved, but practice. Practice, practice, practice. Make sure you know which slide is coming after which slide, how it's coming, when it's coming, what you're going to say here, what you're not going to say there. It's important. It's important to do it and do it with glee and excitement. Do it in the way that you want the audience to actually experience you. If you do it that way with authenticity, and I come back to the word authenticity, and you're practicing with authenticity, trust me, you will deliver something that goes beyond what you could have imagined. We had our first Women's Day event, and the person who spoke is a good friend of mine. And I know who she is, and I know how expressive she can be. But she spoke in a subject that was so near and dear to her heart that the tone and manner in which she spoke evoked emotion in everybody. And she did a PowerPoint presentation. I don't think you were there at that first Women's Day event launch. And people came back and said, the big thing they said was that you could feel not just the content. I mean, if you ask me what did she talk about, I'm not going to remember that much. But I still recall the emotion I got out of it listening to her because she was emotional about it. So the practice is about how do I want people to perceive what it is that I'm going to be giving to them? At which points do I want to be low if I have? At which points do I want to be high if I have? But you can't be monotonous. But where is it that there's a part of this presentation that really excites me and gets me going? Practice. If you don't practice, you're going to be nervous. And you're predominantly going to be nervous about the content that you're going to deliver. If you can get the content out of the way and the authenticity out of the way, then you are, in my opinion, 80 to 90% there. That's the key parts. So people will make you believe that presenting some very deep, arduous skill. I took my daughter and I said to her, learning to ride a bike is a skill and it takes time. She had been riding the bike with her what do you call these things, with the additional wheels on them, and we removed those wheels so that she could just ride on the two wheels, the support wheels that are usually on the side for young people. And I thought that she was going to take at least a day or two to catch on. Literally on the second time she put herself on that on the bike and rode off, she was riding. And she even surprised herself. But why? Because her enthusiasm, her excitement, her intention to want to do it was so overwhelming that the whole physique took over. And that's the point that you want to get at. If you want to deliver a presentation that other people buy into in terms of what it is that you're saying. How do you deal with nerves during? Well, arrive early. I've got lots of stories to tell you about arriving early, right? So I'm glad Zoom came along, because Zoom is a much easier way for me to present. If there is one thing Vic can't stand, is a laptop and a projector, because there is always a guarantee, for those of you who've gone through this, that laptops and projectors are going to play up some point somehow when you arrive. So when we were in Stanton Chase, we used to do a lot of presentations. As a matter of fact, everything that we did was a presentation. We pitched most of the time. And if we had a meeting at 2, we would get there at 1. And then 30 minutes before the meeting, we would insist that we are shown to the boardroom, where we would set up the laptop, set up, and et cetera, which normally would take, if it's quick and it works, 10 minutes. Then we chilled. We were okay. If you arrive early, there are certain other things that you can do. You can work the room. And one of the things that you must try and do in order to avoid nerves during is to try and engage with the very people that you're going to be speaking to if you don't know them from a bar of soap. And not all of them. If there's an audience of 100, engage with 3. Get their names. Have their names firmly implanted in your mind, and have a conversation that's general and relative, because general and relative will also put you at ease. And that's what you need to be trying to do, consistently putting it at your ease. If you don't arrive early, this thing is going to start taking some very nasty shapes in itself, because from that onset, you're at the back foot. You arrive and people are sitting down and they're already looking at you. So it's critical you manage your time in arriving. And I find that to be core to ensuring that there's some level of mitigation of nerves during the discussion. Take deep breaths. If you're not a proficient speaker, you do not have to speak at pace. You can absolutely take your time. As a matter of fact, one of the things I really like sometimes about listening to particularly Zimbabweans speak is that they have a proficiency for pausing at moments that even comedians don't get, right? Because there's a timing in their speaking. When they speak, there's a rhythm to their language. So they have a proficiency of stopping at certain points, which is really, I've always found it fascinating. But always take deep breath, relax, have the conversation in this manner. Listen to how many people speak in different ways. If you listen to how Madiba used to speak, he was definitely not a fast speaker. As a matter of fact, sometimes you wanted to wind him up and go, can you speak a little bit faster? So the manner in which you actually are able to ensure that you do not run out of breath as you're conversing is important, because the moment you start running out of breath as you're conversing, you're going to realize that. You're going to take big gulps of air, and that's going to start making you nervous. And then your tone and the communication language that you're using starts changing. So relax, take deep breaths, take pauses in your conversation. Do not have a fear of saying what you want to say, how you want to say it. Be authentic, by the way. Let it be the you that you are. Okay. When you're nervous and you want to speak quickly and you're speaking quickly and you're nervous and you want to speak quickly, it just all compounds the issue. The last thing, and this is powerful, by the way, and this is why I said the 3 people that you find in the room before you start speaking, whose names you've got, look them out in the audience and smile. And if you can't find them in the audience, use their name in your speech. Sizwe, when I just met him a little bit earlier on, we were just having a conversation about how things are going. And he was just giving me an example of some of the things that are happening in his world. Now, I haven't told you what we said, but I have mentioned his name, right? And if Caesar was across the room, and not right now I'm doing it over Zoom, so smiling only helps me, but I can't get the reaction back. But if you're in a public audience, smile. Smile. You know, look over to people, stop and smile. It's okay to do that. As a matter of fact, it's important. And it'll also help you in terms of how you're responding to that particular time. And smiling will take a lot of the edge away in terms of your nerves, because normally what happens when you're nervous is you tense up. And when you tense up, the last thing that you do is smile. I've got a picture of a guy who's smiling perfectly, right, as he's presenting whatever he is presenting. So that was dealing with nerves. So authenticity, you know, be clear on authenticity. Bring who you are, but be absolutely and unequivocally professional about what it is that you're bringing in to that environment. Otherwise, it goes pear-shaped when you don't do that. Arrive early. Arrive early. The time for you to work your nerves off are, if you've got 15, 20 minutes before you get up to speak, to work your nerves, to walk around, to have a cup of coffee, to converse with a couple of people, it will make a world of difference. So here are a few tips that I have, just to end off, on what I would describe as the kind of things that I do. So I talked about, where possible, use people's names. So you're going to have different types of presentations, right? You're going to have different types of a situation where you are presenting, where the focus is on you. So, you know, let's say, you know, my last major kind of event where I wasn't presenting, but the focus was on me, was when I was MC at a wedding. So if you're not somebody who is comfortable in cracking jokes, and be true to yourself and authentic, because some people think they're funny, but they're not. Use people's names as a breaker in terms of how you converse. So where possible, when you're asking a question, for example, you know, Caesar, what I mean, what do you think, you know, of such and such a thing? Or, you know, John, what's your view of such and such? And Tombi, what's your view? Sometimes in presentations, and this can come later in terms of another discussion, what if you are the lead presenter, try and make sure everybody's got a name tag in front of them. And when you address them by that name tag. And that, I've seen some people do that effectively well, really, really well, because it creates that engagement, it creates that participation, and people get that feeling that they're being seen and recognized. Have an interlude of either a joke or a story. Now, again, as I say, if you're not comfortable with jokes, make it a story. I've told you probably several stories already, right, in my presentation to you now. I've cut it up with a couple of my own personal experiences. I've cut it up with some of the tragedies I've had with regards to presenting. Convert your conversation somewhere along the line into a story. People connect with stories where they can relate what it is that you're presenting with you, because that's where also the level of authenticity can reflect itself. So this person is real, they've gone through this, this is what they've done, you know, et cetera, et cetera. If you can crack a joke, crack a joke. If you can have a moment of interlude, like I did now to go and infect somebody, have a moment of interlude. It can be a pause. You know, you can look around at everybody in the audience and stop and say, hey, is everybody still with me? Do you all agree in what I've just said? Is everybody comfortable? Am I going too quickly? Can everybody still hear me? So create interludes in your presentation. Don't let it be the dot, 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 the dot. People die a death. And make eye contact. Now, of course, that's a little difficult with Zoom. But even with Zoom, camera's on me, I'm looking at the camera, I'm looking at my presentation. It is a skill that you have to consistently, I mean, I could be having this conversation and I could be doing this, which I'm sure you're all seeing, which is not necessarily looking at you. So Make sure you're in a Zoom situation, you're having at least focus attention in the direction. And when you're looking at your presentation, you tend to be looking in the direction of the camera, but don't be the person who has the capability of talking and going left, right, and center. But in an audience where people are with you, it's important for you to make eye contact. Some great presenters, actually, when they present to large audiences, don't like the lights half dim. They actually want to go out and have a look at about 5 or 6 people in the audience that they can go, okay, I'm going to cast my eye there, but I'll be looking at them. I'm going to cast my eye there, but I'll be looking at them. I'm going to cast my eye there, but I'll be looking at them. So make eye contact. What does eye contact do? It helps your authenticity, right? It creates the connection that you want. Remember, I'm telling you, in my opinion, 70% is the connection, 30% is the content, the enthusiasm, the excitement, what you're trying to say. But when that is embellished with eye contact, do you get what I'm saying? You know, I know I don't do this, but I know one of the guys who talks about presenting is that sometimes you can move into the camera. Did you see that? You know, but in the world of where you are in contact with somebody, make that eye contact consistently. Big. I talked about what's going to kill the presentation at the beginning. Let me tell you what's going to kill the presentation at the end. Keep time. You'll see me every once in a while. I've got my phone here. I look at my time and I look to see how far I'm going and how far I'm doing. Keep time. If you've got a 30-minute presentation, finish it in 28 minutes. If you've got a 10-minute presentation, finish it in 9 minutes. And please don't be the person who says, in conclusion, and finally, and to end off, and then there's still more. And where you are feeling that there's a time relationship versus what it is that you want to say, then those are the presentations you need to have some kind of writing down. And when you're practicing and writing down, I work on, usually I'm wearing, if I'm doing a presentation on Zoom, I'll have several things that I can touch, and then the time will come up and it'll show me what time it is. When I'm doing a presentation live, I take my watch off and I put it on the counter, right? And then what you need to do is, when you're practicing, you need to know, if it's a 30-minute presentation, where should I be in 15 minutes? Typically halfway through your presentation, right? So you should know where halfway is on your presentation and where halfway is in terms of your time. If you've got a PowerPoint slide and you struggle with timekeeping, number the slides so that the slides say, slide 1 is X amount, slide 2 is Y amount, slide C is this, that, and the other, and you just carry on doing that until you are correlating what you're doing with your time. Otherwise, you're going to kill a presentation when everybody's expecting it to finish in X amount of time, and woe behold, 10 minutes later, the person's still going on. So if you're given a time limit and it's 10 minutes, 15 minutes, half an hour, 30 minutes, whatever it is, practice keeping to that time. It's essential. Otherwise, you'll blow everything that you've done. Then you end off by telling them what you said you were going to tell them. Remember, right at the beginning, I had my agenda. End off by saying, right, folks, thank you very much. In conclusion, and this must be your conclusion, thank you for joining our presentation on our skills presentation talk. And I hope you remember that being authentic is important for the sake of your first impressions. Practice until you got it, but don't forget to smile. Thank you. And that's how you end off the presentation. You start off by telling them what you were going to tell them, and then you end off very briefly, without having to go through the whole presentation again, telling them and reminding them of the 2 or 3 or 4 key points of how to end off and how to complete. And then that's it. And trust me, anybody can do that. Anyone can do that if you just keep to those small, rather rhythmic approaches to how you're going to run a presentation.